Today, we're looking at Private Reserve's Sonic Blue. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Private Reserve's Sonic Blue is a blue ink. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples, I put the ink into a different pen for a day, I then put it into... Good Lord. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a cross Bailey with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now before we go to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this gray line across the bottom that's very there as it's immediately in the water. Some gray does push up, but that's about it. Now we see hints of purple in the chromatography as it pushes up, and then a very bright blue. That purple is, I think, what's giving this blue its depth in the writing sample. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. That gray line across the bottom, very permanent, very there, absolutely not budging. The purple is much harder to see that has pushed up, and the blue doesn't look as dark across the top. I think some of that all stayed in the bottom line. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on your page, and more importantly, how hard it would be to clean out of your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, that's how an ink should perform if it's going to be permanent. That extra fine is still an extra fine. It's not blowing out. It's not getting feathery. It's easy to read. It's safe in a note-taking situation. I was kind of expecting some of that blue to move. Looking at the water test, you see that the water completely removed all of the blue parts of that ink. It only left the gray behind. That gray really got in there. Now, Pen Flesh had the exact same problem. All of the blue's gone, all of the gray's there. It is not getting all of this ink off the paper. And this ink did take a little bit more work to get out of my pen. 1/3 bleach solution completely obliterates it. You put it quickly into the pen, quickly out of the pen, quickly rinse it with water, flush it with water, get it completely cleaned out so you don't rust your metal parts. I did have to do a little bit more getting this ink out of my pen. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Private Reserve's Sonic Blue has a viscosity of 2.23, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Private Reserve's Sonic Blue has an average dry time of 18 seconds, making it normal. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shading. Not here. The extra fine is a slightly lighter tone, just ever so slightly. Move in a little bit for you here, guys. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It does have spots of shading. Spots of, while it's a darker blue, much darker places, like the E in seconds, the K in quick, the L in lazy. The word the is significantly darker than the word over right next to it. It took 11 seconds to dry. The medium is a slightly lighter tone than the extra fine. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it has some very nice shading. In quick, it starts dark and it works its way, starts light and works its way very dark. Brown starts dark and works its way very light. Fox starts light and works its way very dark. It seems to do this back and forth, light to dark, and it's really neat to see. 16 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows no color variation, although we do get some in the writing sample. The medium shows some very nice color variation, and we do get it in the writing sample. The smear test, I believe you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Tomoe River. Now, with the exception of the scrubby that seems to come through, but I put it on stupid thick, there's no bleeding, but there's a ton of ghosting, and that's not the fault of the ink. That's Tomoe River. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shading whatsoever. The extra fine is the same tone as the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 18 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 32 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both of them show us no color variation. And we didn't get any. And the smear test, I believe you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. At least the medium looks much more clear than the extra fine. The extra fine, I just barely do see those lines, so I think you could get it. Rhodia paper. No bleeding. No real ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. But the extra fine being a slightly lighter tone than the 1.1, the extra fine comes in with no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and some shading. Not a ton of shading, but some nice shading where it does show up. It's a darker blue, so it's harder for it to shade. Like on Lazy, it starts very dark, but on the Y, it gets to a nice lighter tone. Fox starts very dark, gets light, and gets very dark again. Jumps starts much lighter and works its way much darker, and 12 seconds to dry. Now the medium is the same tone as the extra fine. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it too offers some shading. The Q starts very dark, and then it gets much lighter in quick, and then it gets super dark at the C into K. Nice. And brown starts super dark and lightens up. Fox starts dark, gets light, and gets dark again. Beautiful. 17 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine and the medium, you have to look far left to far right on the extra fine, and you can see some color variation. And if you look far left to far right on a medium, you see color variation. And that's the color variation we got in the writing sample. The smear test, I believe without a doubt, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Monokaki. I feel like I'm butchering that name every time, and it's like an Ace Ventura word. Monokaki. Monokaki. It's a nice thin paper. That's not a bleed spot. That's a spot where when I moved the page, it touched another page and it transferred over. Other than that, we have no bleeding. We have plenty of ghosting though, but it is a thinner paper. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade whatsoever. The extra fine is a slightly, ever so slightly, lighter tone than the 1.1. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. None. 7 seconds to dry. Now the medium is a significantly darker tone than the extra fine. It is a little darker than the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show no color variation. This looks much more on camera than it does in person, but I'm not seeing any up here. I see none. I got none. The smear test, I believe you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. TWSBI notebook paper. I like TWSBI notebooks. I enjoy them. They're not always the best performing papers in terms of bringing out qualities of the ink, but I like how consistent this paper is. And I've used like 4 of their notebooks, and it has been super consistent, especially when there's certain mainstay inks I use a lot of. This always does well. And it has no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a slightly lighter tone. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and it does offer some shading. Like the K in quick is darker than the rest of the word. The word the is significantly darker than the word brown or over right next to it. Fox starts light and works its way dark. 12 seconds to dry. Now the medium is a significantly darker tone, darker than the extra fine and darker than the 1.1. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and yet somehow it still gives us some shading. Like in the word brown, it starts lighter, it gets dark in the OW, and lightens up again back into the N. Fox starts light and gets dark. Lazy starts light, gets dark, and gets light again. Very nice. 16 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both of them show us color variation. And we get some color variation. It matches. The smear test, you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Moleskin. Now the front doesn't look too bad. The back doesn't look too bad. We're talking about moleskin paper here. Have a little bit of leniency. Yes, there's plenty of bleed spotting coming through. The scrubby looks horrendous, but that's a scrubby and it doesn't really count. All of this spotting aside, it does not render the page unusable in a pocket walk-around notebook. It does not touch the page underneath. So while there's a lot of bleeding, but not all the way through the page, and that causes a lot of ghosting, sort of, but it causes a little bit of problems there. I don't think it makes the back of this unusable in, I need to just jot this down in my notebook paper. So way to go, Moleskin. The medium at the top. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. That is probably the best performing medium nib ink I have gotten on a Moleskin notebook. Fantastic. That's a 2 thumbs up for you. The extra fine is the same tone as the medium. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 4 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby showed us no color variation. We got none. And the smear test, that's a maybe. Maybe you could recover it. But this is amazing performance on Moleskin, a paper that hates liquid ink. That is all that I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Private Reserve Sonic Blue, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Being a loud, screaming, vivid blue, I really wanted a more muted red, kind of a red-brown, perhaps Private Reserve's Vampire Red. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Private Reserve's Sonic Blue? This is a great performing dark blue ink that even gives shading. A dark blue that gives shading. Very nice. This was an exciting ink to use. It really felt energetic the whole time just seeing it on the page. And if you like blue inks, I believe that this is something that you should try out in a sample, because you might be missing out. Thanks for watching.